The Oregon Ducks cap off an unbelievable 13-0 season, their first year in the Big Ten, and they walk right in and claim the Big Ten championship. They will be the number one seed in the college football playoff after an absolutely fantastic game in Indianapolis.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
What an instant classic of a football game. Maybe, just maybe, the best Big Ten championship game of all time. Offenses went up and down the field. Key plays in key situations. Big plays, big players making big plays in key situations. It's maybe everything you could ask for from a college football game. But of course, what are we going to talk about? The winner. Oregon comes into the Big Ten in year number one and accomplishes something that no team has done in the Big Ten since 2015. The 2015 Michigan State Spartans was the last team before this Oregon Ducks squad to beat the Michigan Wolverines, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and the Penn State Nittany Lions in the same season. And boy, just like this game, the Oregon Ducks were fun to watch all year long. All right, let's get in and let's start to break the game specifically down in this one. And when we break things down, maybe we start first with down defenses. I think it was great offenses, though, as well in this football game for both the Oregon Ducks and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Like, you look at the defensive performances, there is certainly a talking point for both the Penn State fan base and the Oregon fan base to say, yeah, that was certainly not our best defensive performance of the year. But I think on the flip side, I thought these offenses really came to play. Look, we knew what Oregon was, of course, from an offensive standpoint. We knew that they were a very explosive team, and Penn State would certainly have to play their A game to be able to keep the Ducks in check into this one. But I was impressed with the way Penn State played offensively in this game. I thought that this was Penn State's best offensive performance of the 2024 season. I thought Andy Kotelnicki had a very specific game plan, and he executed most of it really, really well in this particular game against the Oregon Ducks. Let's talk about some defensive lines, because that was the big, when I talked in my preview, I talked a lot about these defensive lines, and they were really good defensive lines coming into this game. I thought both offensive lines played pretty well in this particular game. There's no doubt about it. Neither defensive line got a ton of pressure. Now, I'm not going to blame it on certainly poor performances, because I don't think these were poor performances by both defensive lines. I think there's credit to go to the offensive lines and to the quarterbacks. We knew Dylan Gabriel had some scoot in him, quarterback, of course, for the Oregon Ducks, but Drew Aller did a really good job keeping plays alive, evading the pressure. I think both offensive coordinators knew what they were dealing with from a pass rush perspective, from a defensive line and pressure perspective. You know, Oregon was already a team that gets rid of the football quickly. I think Penn State, what they did in the run game really certainly helped to slow down the pass rush for Oregon. I will certainly get to that in a minute, but both offensive lines, specifically Penn State, I thought they played a really good game on the offensive line. Nolan Rucci at tackle coming in for Anthony Donkow, I thought played a very good game as well. He did a good job manning up Mateo Uyunglele on a lot of specific plays there towards the edge, certainly as well. But both offenses certainly came ready to play with a really good game plan in Indianapolis. And you got to credit both of these football teams. The way I see it right now, I think these are, we knew, and if you've been watching this channel, you know I think that Oregon, right, is certainly sitting up here as far as the Big Ten. They are the champions, and I think they're sitting up here, and they're going to be the number one seed, and I think they are the national championship favorite right now. That's not news to anybody. But I look at Penn State in the way they played in this specific football game. If they play like that, if they run the football like that, more on that in just a minute. Right? If offensively, we know what their defense can do. Like Oregon's a good offense, right? Maybe the best offense that they will face the rest of the season. But if Penn State can play this type of game that they played in Indianapolis, this is a Nittany Lions team that if they have that nice road, which I think being the number 5 seed or being the number 6 seed, they could certainly have a comfortable road to the college football playoff semifinals. This is a team that can certainly make some noise if they continue to play like this that they did today. Let's talk about Tez Johnson, oh why don't we, the Big Ten championship game MVP. Here's the thing about Tez. He was hurt for a while, and you could kind of tell that Tez's absence was affecting Oregon's offense. When he comes back, they are just so much more explosive. They are so much more dynamic on the offensive side of the football. Like what he can do from a slot perspective, I'm not sure if certainly anybody in the conference, I don't know if anybody else in college football can really help out their offense out of the slot the way that Tez Johnson certainly can. Look, Penn State could not cover him, right, with their slot corners. They could not match up with him. When Tez Johnson was able to get space, when Tez Johnson was able to get the football in his hands, when he was able to get separation, he had a lot more speed and a lot more explosiveness than anybody on the back end of that Penn State secondary. How about 11 catches, 181 yards, and a touchdown in this game for Tez Johnson over there? And here's one thing that I want to make sure I mention. That Tez was able to do really good, and that Oregon, and specifically Dillon Gabriel, was able to do really, really good in this particular game. When Dillon Gabriel was able to move the pocket, get outside the pocket, he was able to scramble. Now the routes break down. Now that's where, and Dillon is so good at that improvisation when the pocket breaks down and he gets out of the pocket. And when you play as many college football games as he's played, right, you're going to know what to do in those situations. But he's so good at getting out of the pocket and keeping his eyes downfield. And Tez Johnson, with his quickness, with his agility, with his explosiveness, how he is able to get open and find the spots. He was so good in this game. When the pocket broke down, he was so good at finding the spots, finding separation. So when he did make the catch, he was able to make some explosive yardage as well. Let's talk. I want to make sure that I talk about this for Penn State because it relates certainly to the Oregon Ducks as well. Run, Lions, run. And boy, did they run the football today. Boy, did they run the football today. I said in my preview, I thought it would be a challenge for Penn State to run the football, but they needed to be able to run the football. They needed to be able to get to the perimeter. Andy Kotelnicki did a really good job in getting Katron Allen, getting Nick Singleton heavily involved in the run game, and most of all, getting them to that second level so that when they have that head of steam, they're able to get those big chunks, certainly in yardage. I talked about the Nittany Lion offensive line before. I thought Penn State played as good of a game as they've played all year long on the offensive line, specifically in run blocking, right? What did we say in the preview? Look what Derek Harmon had been doing. Look what Jamari Caldwell had been doing. Look what this linebacker group had been playing. Like there were some situations for Oregon when it did get to that second level for Penn State. They weren't the best at wrapping up. Now, when it comes to a tackling, when you're talking about tackling, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, not the easiest guys to certainly tackle out there in the open field. Andy Kotelnicki schemed up some really good concepts to get these guys out on the perimeter to get those explosive runs, which is exactly what I lined out in the preview that Penn State needed to be able to do in this game. You know, the Nittany Lions just kept on running the ball and running the ball and running the ball right at the Oregon Ducks. So this is something. Now you look at Oregon, they're going to be that number 1 seed. They're going to have that bye right now. They're going to have to shore things up against them in the run defense, certainly right now. So we'll see if they're going to be able to do that. But this Penn State team might be as good of a rushing offense that they will see maybe outside of a team like Notre Dame, who's also really good at running the football. We'll see where the matchups certainly break where they may as well. I want to make sure I mention a couple of other things, but before I get out of here on this specific breakdown and this specific reaction, Oregon and the lateral passing game. I think we need to talk about that. Penn State did a really good job at tackling out on the perimeter. Right, Oregon and Will Stein, they called a lot of lateral passing plays, swing it out, whether it was to a running back, whether it was to receiver, right, whoever it was to. They did a couple of concepts. And there was kind of when it got later in the game, it kind of got, for my taste at least, it got to be a little bit too much. Certainly at that point in time, Penn State did a great job tackling out there in space. That's why Oregon needed to get more north and south, and when Tez Johnson was able to separate in the middle of the field, that's where those catch-and-run situations were certainly be able to open up for the Oregon Ducks within this game as well. I think the big key and why this game ended up the way it did with an Oregon victory over Penn State, I think, was the early part of that third quarter. I think the way the Ducks came out early on in the second half, I think really helped them springboard to the rest of the game. But I want to say one last thing here. Penn State is maybe the most resilient football team I've seen in a long time, man. They got behind against USC. They had a tough game against Minnesota. Remember Bowling Green earlier on during the season. Man, they have been in a lot of precarious situations, but they have battled back and battled back and battled back. How about being behind 28-10 after the interception? I thought that was a point where Oregon could really take control of this game and the Ducks could really start running away with it. But man, it's just, we might get into this situation in the college football playoff where Penn State is sitting there and Penn State is down 10, 14, 17, maybe 20 or 21 points, but you can never count out these cardiac cats. Big congrats to the Oregon Ducks winning the Big Ten championship in their very first year in the Big Ten Conference.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.